My presentation, I was just listening to the previous panel where they were trying to kind of coalesce the India stack and Aadhaar with distributed technologies. I felt like trying to fit a square peg in a hole, if I may say, because Aadhaar is the ultimate government-controlled centralized identity system, whereas it's the exact opposite of the entire philosophy behind blockchain and decentralization. So I can think of identity management systems like Civic and others fitting very well, but it's going to be hard to fit in a Aadhaar-based infrastructure into a blockchain-based decentralized application. But that's just my opinion. Okay, so my talk today is about playing the long game. Playing the long game, what I mean by is towards innovators, people seeking to disrupt, investors backing those, and what are the things they need to be watchful for, because you're going to be disrupting vested interest, entrenched incumbents, and they're going to be fighting back. And sometimes the disruptors and their backers are their own worst enemies. And I thought I'll share some of my thoughts on this subject. The world, pretty simple. Okay, we categorize heroes and villains. Some of the folks right here talk about investment banks as villains because they play a rigged game. They are insiders, they pick and choose who they take to market, and the whole game is rigged for their own friends and so on and so forth. There is certainly an element of truth towards that. And these are the crowd that is like calling out these villains who are part of the decentralized crowd, P2P and so on and so forth. And there is a bit of irony here because they applaud the Googles of the world and the Facebooks of the world, and hey, how Uber is like, doing a one-up on this particular investment banker during their IPO process. Great. The point is, Uber and Airbnb are the ultimate rent-seeking middlemen here. If there ever was somebody who's a central control taking a substantial stake out of every transaction, the ultimate middleman, so how come they are heroes? I mean, in my mind, actually, they are the ultimate villain from the standpoint of the decentralized crowd, but sometimes I watch them applaud the Airbnbs and the Ubers when discussing IPOs, for example. Not to mention the Googles and the Facebooks and the other companies who are preying on your data and monetizing that. So the context matters here when we talk about heroes and villains. So today's hero could be tomorrow's villain, and something to think about. Next thing I want to touch on is the trough of disillusionment. So I'm stealing from Gartner here. So we talk about terms. So media is very good at this. .com bust, crypto winter. Oh my God, the sky is falling down. And again, there is a reckoning. Who are the villains and the heroes? What happened to this meltdown? What's wrong with this? And there is like a deep depression that pervades. What I fail to understand is why. Because if you entered for disruption, you're looking for transformation, there is going to be blood out there. And rather than sulking and running to the door, please remember as to why you entered it in the first place, whether it is you believed in programmable money, for example, or whatever the case may be. Remember the fundamentals, and if you went into this war or this disruption with those kind of convictions, don't run, because the opportunity is right there after the charlatans and others make a quick exit. And why does this disillusionment happen? Because, again, stealing Gartner, it is the hype cycle. Or I call it the drinking the Kool-Aid. So when Bitcoin exploded and blockchain was about to come, at least one can see statements to the effect, robo-advisors will replace all wealth managers. Algo trading will reign supreme. No need for traders. ICOs will eliminate the VC industry. Cryptocurrencies will replace fiat currency. Traditional investment banking is dead. Trade finance fully based on smart contracts, no need for correspondent banks. Clearing and settlement entities will be dead with blockchain. Point is, there is some truth to that, or these are probably people were telling themselves, hyping themselves to motivate themselves. But in reality, blockchain has been around for 5 years. And if you really listen to the panel and other speakers earlier today, there are very, very few real life implementations at scale. And why is that? Because while the disruptors have been hyping and pumping their fists and everything, the vested interests out there were making sure that to stall them, to compete effectively using their clout in the industry, their lobbying power, and so on and so forth. Ultimately, when you're looking for major disruption, especially technology-led disruption, one should not overestimate how much can be done in the near term. So this is the fault of a lot of disruptors. We tend to overestimate what can be achieved in the immediate term and tend to actually underestimate what's possible in the long term. And that's been proven repeatedly through every major technology change. So my perspective, and I happen to be part of the villain community, if you will, spent quite some time in Wall Street. I've been an entrepreneur in the Bay Area. I worked for major banks. I worked for Swift, the ultimate middleman, if you will, worked in the payments industry. I've also been a disruptor as somebody who spent time. So there was a topic on what is blockchain doing for the common good. So I spent time with John Henry Klippinger in a data commons initiative, helping with citizen services and so on and so forth, from Barcelona to Amsterdam to other places. So it is possible to do it, and it is possible to deliver services to the common public through this exciting technology that we call as blockchain. I also happen to be associated with fintech startups. So one startup I want to call out is a reinforced learning-based startup that is just becoming a hedge fund, a completely technology solution with no traders, nobody, but it is going to be one of the leading hedge funds, in my opinion. So what drives me is this perspective that I'm part of the so-called old villain community, if you will, Wall Street investment banking to payment systems and entrenched incumbent industry, while at the same time being a disruptor and working for the common good and supporting startups seeking to disrupt. And that gives me a balanced perspective as to what's possible and how to do it, and so on and so forth. And on top of that, I'm a sucker for deep tech and its application in industry, so I go for it. Yes? Okay. Can we go to the previous slide, please? Okay. So this is like after every technology-led disruption and downturn, if you will, there is like the usual losers, and some of them very well deserved. Guys who want to make the quick buck, for example. And then certainly there are the winners. I'm not going to call out, these names are very well known. And the point is, sometimes the winners happen to be very large players, not necessarily a fintech. Who would imagine that Amazon could be a leading insurance provider? Now, we all know about cult fit here, and okay, most people think it as like a for health and fitness and everything. In my opinion, the founders and their backers are seeking it to be a dominant insurance company. This is my guess, because I don't have any inside knowledge, but you can see the kind of data that they are collecting, the kind of stuff that they're doing, and they're extremely well positioned to be an insurance company, if not the major contributor to the insurance industry, which is why the valuations that they are seeking is what they're getting away with. But the point I want to focus is the last one. Some who deserve but hang on, and they hang on with lobbying power and other things, which I'll cover more in the next slide. But as a disruptor, please do not underestimate the power of these vested interests. Next slide, please. So Kodak is like a poster child for a lot of people talking about digital transformation. Oh, remember Kodak? Oh, how many hundreds of thousands of people, what kind of market share, and they disappeared. My point is, how many other Kodak examples are out there? It is true, a lot of large Fortune 500 corporations have died, but they died through competition from their traditional competitors. There have been very few disruptors who come and replaced somebody else. And that is especially true in the financial services world. So I'm going to call out two quotes. I don't want to pick on Larry Ellison or Jamie Dimon here, but look, these are very, very smart leaders, okay? And especially when they are speaking in public, every word is measured. Larry goes on to say in Oracle World that cloud is like gibberish, while a couple of years later he admits that he had already invested in NetSuite, all the while Oracle building its capability in cloud computing. Point is, that's what he said, but let's look at what he did actually. Jamie Dimon goes in 2017 and he calls Bitcoin a fraud, cryptocurrency is nonsense. And then in 2019 now, we have the JPM coin rolling out. The point here is, these are very smart people. They are not going to go away like Kodak, for example, and you have to be watching out. So look at clearing and settlement, a very obvious case for blockchain to have taken off in the industry. But where is the traction? It is happening in much more in supply chain and logistics, perhaps somewhere in provenance in the pharma industry. But why did it not happen in the obvious place like clearing and settlement? DTCC jumped forward. Oh yes, I am doing it. And the cynic in me tells me perhaps they jumped in to slow the adoption in the industry, perhaps. So these are some of the things one should watch out as we go seek to disrupt industries. The vested interests are going to be fighting back very, very hard. Next slide, please. So how do you handle this? We talked about the hype and the disillusionment. And I want to call out another quote, a leader, Deng Xiaoping, who is like the father and the architect of the modern Chinese revolution, if you will. And he talked about keep a cool head and maintain a low profile, never take the lead, but aim to do something. He unleashed something in the late 70s or early 80s, and the rest is history. Now China is a superpower. The current regime in China perhaps is not following that advice, and you look at Xi Jinping and others, and Rahul talked about this morning about 2025, these are the 6 technologies, we are going to be a leader, and so on and so forth. So they have forgotten what Deng had told 30 years ago, and clearly they are facing a backlash at this point. But the point about Deng is, yes, go for the disruption, but keep a low profile, understand what works, what does not work. So if you're going to go take on the securities industry, Wall Street and so on and so forth, my baby step with my Ethereum or Hyperledger, don't go in for, because they will say my transaction speed, my throughput performance needs, and here comes quorum. Or I am going to need to build a layer 2 like Lightning, for example. The point is, people with naivete, not a full understanding and appreciation of what the industry operates, and the vested interests are going to use your ignorance and naivete to work against you. So again, please be aware of the power of the vested interests, understand the market, understand the industry before setting about on this disruption journey. Having said all that, let me call out few technologies. The first one is pretty clear, analytics and AI. I think who is not talking about it? I'm not going to say much about it. The only thing on data, I feel, is an opportunity with compliance and other regulations like GDPR coming on board, is a huge opportunity for startups to play. And I will call out something on the cryptography. So cryptography has at least unleashed 3 major strands, if you will. One is blockchain that we are all well familiar with. Second is cryptocurrencies, talk about tokenization, fractionalization, asset-backed, democratization, and so on and so forth. What is less understood is the third strand, which is I call homomorphic computing, a well-known field in academic circles now about to hit the mainstream. We talked about data and data privacy and data empowerment, and most people think it is a binary choice. Oh, if you have privacy, I can't empower it, and vice versa. Homomorphic computing allows you to have the cake and eat it too. And let me repeat, have the cake and eat it too. How so? Because homomorphic computing allows you to query and process encrypted data without decryption. Again, you can process encrypted data without decryption, which means privacy can be certainly supported while you can empowering and monetizing the data. This is going to be very, very huge, and the implications are far and wide, cutting across multiple industries and certainly in fintech. And quantum computing. So all the way from cybersecurity to some of the advanced processing needs is going to be available towards use of quantum computing. So I'm calling out these technologies as to have the most profound impact in the financial services industry in the coming years.